Same viewership? Uh-oh. Who joined?
Mr. Borelli.
Oh, boy.
Decency. You know? How's it going?
That's going. How'd you feel about your Tim Pool performance?
Mixed bag. I was only supposed to do the morning Culture Wars show, and I just had a good enough impression that they had me on for the evening show. Evening show delved into Israel-Palestine. I'm too impressed with Tim's treatment of the other guest, who is more pro-Palestine. I thought that it came off as, a little browbeating of that person. So I just kind of sat quietly back and listened to them run in circles for an hour and a half. It's not a great time. I thought the people behind the scenes were very nice. Tim was very nice behind the scenes, and I enjoyed it. It was bad timing for me, though, because for a smaller streamer like me, you'd like to parlay that into like, okay, now I'm going to do a bunch of streams right after that and hopefully get a small bump. But unfortunately, my wife was going on vacation, like a bridal shower thing for 5 days. So I had to single dad it. So I was unable to stream for like the next 6 days. So
Oh, damn.
I was glad to do it. And hopefully,
Wait, how old is your child?
three.
Ooh,
So,
okay, gotcha.
yeah, so it was fun. It was interesting because that was the longest amount of time my son was without his mom being around. So it was a lot of fun to kind of, eat cookies and shit like that he's not supposed to be doing. We had a good time. So
Here's a random question. Do you think it would be easier to have two kids that are the same age as opposed to one kid?
yeah, I do.
You do?
I can see there's pluses and minuses of it. Like, do you mean like directly the same age, like twins, or do you
Like
mean,
basically like it's close enough? Because I'm sure now, because you spent 5 days with them, kids are, God, you feel like, not to project, or I'm not projecting, I'm not accusing you. When I say you, I mean in the general sense. Sorry, I just qualified that like 50 times, yeah. You feel like such a shit parent though, when it's like, you have your kid and it's like, okay, I am going to spend every waking moment for the next week. Mom is out of town, this is going to be awesome. And then like on day one, like 3 hours in, it's like, okay, fuck, we need to get the TV, the iPad out, because this motherfucker literally needs all of my attention. Oh my God. There were so many times with Nathan as a kid when he was like 3, 4, 5, where I'm like, you need a brother. Holy shit. Like, I can't just run around and do all this random shit for hours. Yeah, because they never stop. It's like crazy. And I always wondered sometimes, like, I wonder if it's easier to have twins or to have two children that can like occupy each other's attention. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that that's one of my failures as a father that I can already see that I need to get better, is that when I see my friends that have multiple kids, which by the way, most people my age, I'm 39, most of my friend group chose not to have kids, but those that do, I feel like, I talk to someone like Connor Points, and he's like, dude, you gotta leave your kid at the playground, just run around and be a maniac. Me, I'm like on eggshells. I'm like, oh my God, that slide's too big. And I gotta do everything for him. And I think that's unfair to him. He needs some certain amount of independence. And I think once you have multiple children, particularly if they're around the same age, you sort of let them, one, because it would be too burdensome to be like that to both of them, but you also start to realize that they're sort of taking care of each other with a lot of their like curious needs and things like that. So I do think in other ways it would just be straight up more difficult because
For sure.
you're
More
cleaning a mess up
expensive
in one
and you
corner,
got
right.
2 sets of diapers and all that shit. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Okay, I'm curious. Yeah, because we were talking about homelessness stuff the other day. Real quick for chat, for as comfortable or as deep as you're going into, what is your job again?
So I'm called a residential counselor, but basically it's a job that you could have a GED and do, and it is doing home health care for adults with developmental disabilities. The particular company I work with has 2 groups. One is what we call comprehensive. Comprehensive is legitimately just people that have some sort of developmental disability diagnosis that mostly like heavily see things like autism, developmental delays. You see these weird broad diagnoses like intermittent explosive disorder, which is just a fun way of saying they get mad and hit people or destroy property or something at times. The other section's called signals. Signals has a lot of people that have similar diagnoses, but they've had trouble with the law, particularly with sex offenses. And so it might be someone that's heavily autistic, but unfortunately exposed themselves in public or something around a crowd or around children. And so there's different levels of care that's involved with people like that. Obviously, if you're going out into the community, there are certain restrictions and things like that that need to be applied.
Yeah.
But that's basically it. My job is to help facilitate that person's quality of lives and the goals that they have. So I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional. I am trained in passing medications. Depending on the clients you work with, you might be trained to give insulin, to give simple injections, but I'm not making any medical decisions. I'm just there to help facilitate someone's quality of life, basically.
Yeah. So a question that I have is, Do any of the people that you deal with, did any of them come from the streets, or were any of them like previously homeless and they've like transitioning from halfway homes into full-time like living on their own with assistance? Or have you ever dealt with anybody in that capacity before?
Yeah, so I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm in Western Pennsylvania. There are companies like mine that are cropping up all over the place. And one of the reasons is the closing down of sort of the old school traditional mental facilities. So there was a sort of a famous one around here called Polk. And famously in the 80s, Nancy Reagan went to this hospital and found the conditions to be disgusting in there. There's a story, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard this story because it's like only 40 minutes away from me, Polk. Apparently they used to bury the patients out back, but only like 3 feet deep. And there was a big flood that came through at one point, and there were just bodies of these patients that were like washing up into the local streets and stuff.
Jesus.
So it was like that level of care that Nancy Reagan was not a fan of. And it started to sort of direct a national spotlight on Polk, but also in facilities like that. Now, to the people that worked at Polk, there are horror stories, don't get me wrong. Like it's Shutter Island type stuff you would hear. But you also have to imagine their budget's very low, and they might have 5 staff for every 100 patients. And many of these patients, particularly back in the day, but even still to this day, you just don't know what to do. Like if there's someone that has such, a diagnosis that they're enraged and you can't calm them down. And I won't get into specific details, but sometimes people that have these diagnoses, they'll just be inconsolable about something, and it could make them stronger than you would think that a human being could be. And you're some 120-pound nurse, and you got 20 other people in that wing. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So they strap them down to a gurney, and and then those people are deemed monsters. The rest of them, oh, how could you do this to these people? And in some senses, I get it. Many of the people I work with, it's horrible. Have you ever seen the movie Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah, I have.
So there's the scene in Shawshank where Morgan Freeman gets out and he's working at a I don't know, grocery store, and he keeps asking his boss, like, can I go to the restroom? Can I do this? And the boss is like, of course, you're a human being. That's what it's like for a lot of the people I work with. It was like jail.
Yeah.
Like when they'll say little things like, can I get a glass of water? I'm like, yeah, buddy, it's your house. Of course you can get a glass of water. Can I change the channel? Of course, it's your TV. I'm just here to help you. It's your home. So there are certainly people that were in Polk that were on the streets first and then left that facility to a place like mine. And there are people in our company that literally were homeless. Most of the time, the way that happens, the ones that ended up homeless were they had some sort of diagnosis and they had a family member that was taking care of them. And then their family member passes away, or they end up, having failing health, or they or
You just can't support them
they
anymore, yeah.
They can't support them. And so then those people end up on the streets, and then sometimes law enforcement has to deal with them, and through diagnosis, they end up getting recommended for a facility like mine.
Do you think, oh, sorry, one comment on that real quick. Have you ever watched House?
Yeah.
Generally, the medical stuff is like kind of memey. I don't care much, whatever. The one thing that they do on that show that drives me fucking crazy, that I think if you've never dealt with somebody that has like severe mental disabilities, is there are people that are very mentally disabled in some House episodes, but House like always finds the perfect words to say to all of a sudden like bring them in line. It's very frustrating that people in real life don't have a lot of experience dealing with somebody who, you said inconsolable, is literally beyond like rational comprehension. Like there is no set of words. And then also, like you said, and this comes up in cop videos a lot too, it's really hard to bring a full-bodied adult male under control without severely hurting the person. That is a really challenging thing to do. Like you need like 6 people to do it. It's not just one dude that's beefy. It's not 2 dudes. Like it could be a lot of people. If you got like a 6-foot, 200-pound, low-functioning autistic person's having a breakdown, and people are just like, yeah, people will see it. Like you said, they see somebody like tied to a bed and like, oh my God, this is inhuman. How could you do this? But it's like, bro, like this is a challenge. Like you have no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know how deep we can get into this. Obviously, because of HIPAA, and you have to have concern for people's medical privacy. So I can only speak in generalities of situations that I've seen. But, companies that I purposely chose to work for companies that are non-restraint, because I have zero interest in restraining someone. Now, I'm still trained to do the most simple restraints imaginable. Like, we consider a restraint like a wrist hold to grab someone by the wrist safely, and if they're trying to walk into traffic. Technically, that's a restraint, and I have to file a report if I do that, because that is impairing their mobility against their will.
It's assault and battery, technically, right? So you have to have a reason to, yeah.
Exactly. So now there are companies that straight up, because of the violent nature of some of the clients, they're trained to do holds, like hold someone to the ground or hold them with their arms behind their back, and you have to go through training to be able to do that. But the first company I was in, it's kind of a crazy story. I was a debate coach at a local university. I debated there. I was a drunk. Once I ran out of debate eligibility, I became the coach there and continued to be a drunk. No problem. And like 2008, the Pennsylvania budget didn't pass. It was a state school. I walked into work one day. They're like, sorry, dude, see you later. So I picked up the newspaper and was like, I'm going to put my name in for like any random job, security guard, stuff
Wait,
like that.
hold on. Am I missing, when you say you were drunk, do you mean like you had a problem with sobriety, like an alcoholism, or do you just mean you were just like a jerk off?
I was like a college partier. I drank I was pretty cool. I kept my shit together. Like, I wasn't big into drinking and driving, and I certainly stayed sober when I was at work.
Okay,
But
no,
any
right.
day
I didn't know if you
had
meant you were like an alcoholic drunk, if that was, okay. But okay, gotcha. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
maybe considered an but yeah, I kept my shit together. Anyways, I put my name in for this company. They called me back immediately, and I was like, well, what are the details? They're like, oh, you'd work with people with like, mental retardation and autism and whatever. I was like, yeah, sure, sounds good. And I went, and we go through the training, and it's 2 days. Me and my friend went together, and at the end of it, they're like, would you mind getting hit? And I was like, I guess not. My friend was like, yeah, I would mind. So we both started off at 11, I think 10 or 11 bucks an hour. My friend's job, the client he worked with, he played Wii bowling all day, every day. My job, I got the shit beat out of me and I got hospitalized like 6 times. Same job, same money, just different clients. The client that I was put with was formerly at a previous facility where he was staffed 4 to 1. And they would restrain him for hours a day. It's kind of a really sad story. He was the strongest human being I've ever seen. He weighed upwards of 400 pounds. He had a steel reinforced chair that it took me and another guy to drag across the room. The first day I was there, we drug it so he could sweep. Later that night, I watched him pick it up over his head and throw it through a wall.
Jesus.
And he was a sweet guy, but he had constant seizures. And when he would have an episode, there was no talking to him, and that makes it worse, right? Because if it's someone who you could never get through to, then it's like, well, you don't have that expectation. But the guy that you were just sitting there eating dinner with, and he's kind of nonverbal, but you could see that he's relating to you, and then all of a sudden, he's smashing out a window and chasing you with his pane of glass, or he ripped power lines down one time, it was, and or he would attack members of the community. And what I started to see there was, after doing that job for a while, I started to see that there was not one person in the professional field anywhere that I saw that gave 2 shits about this guy but me. He was adopted. His adopted mother didn't care about him. The people at the top of our company, they didn't care. There's almost like a bounty system.
I will say on that note, though, for the people around you, and you might agree, you might disagree with this, that there are a lot of people who can be around a person and you're like, this person is sweet, they just need help. I can't believe you guys seem so uncaring about this person. But man, dude, caretaker burnout, that takes a toll when you're dealing with this person for weeks or months or years. I feel really bad when it happens to families that get burnt out caring for older family members where they just can't do it anymore. Now, maybe in this circumstance, maybe everyone around them was just generally a piece of shit, but even people that mean well, I feel like that burnout is a real thing.
No, that's absolutely true. And like the other staff that worked with me, we were supposed to be 3 to 1. Most of the time I was there by myself or with 2 people, which was a violation of the state regulations, but they couldn't find people that were willing to work. And I don't blame anyone who goes, probably the best person that worked with me was a 120-pound Asian woman. And you'd be like, man, if this guy connected one blow on you, it would be devastating. She was fearless, man. She was way more brave than I was. She was sort of my mentor so there were good people in my position. But I'm talking about when we went to a doctor's office, doctors would refuse to allow us in the office. They would make us sit in the car and literally send the secretary out with scripts. They would not even see him, not even look at him. When some of the police officers that we dealt with regularly were nice, but the people at the psychiatric hospitals we go to, just another patient, put him in there, handcuff him to the bed, we'll get to him later. And again, I understand those people are dealing with a difficult situation, but it just struck me that it was this is still a person that society has zero clue what to do with, none. And I begged my company over and over and over. I have a big heart. I'm for maximum freedom for people. This person should not have been in our company. Our company was not equipped to handle him. It was one thing when he would attack me. I don't mean to be rude or make fun of it. It was almost like watching a movie with Frankenstein or a mummy, where he would come at you slowly. You can get away. I'm not the fastest person in the world, but I was far more agile and fast than him. The problem was he would go after members of the community. And then I'm put in a position where I can't watch him beat some young girl to death. So I'm going to intervene, but legally I'm not allowed. Legally, I'm not allowed to like try to throw him to the ground. And by the way, if I tried to throw him to the ground, he would swat me away like a fly anyways. So I kept seeing it getting closer and closer to harming members of the community. And I'm desperately telling my company, like, you have to get this person in a more secure facility. I understand that sucks. If you have a big heart, you might be saying, no. You got to have maximum freedom. Leave these people live their lives. And I agree with that. But you can only give someone freedom up to the point where they're not a threat to other people.
Yeah.
And this person was clearly a threat.
And something I think that's really tragic is people don't realize when you're dealing with people that might have a limited capacity in some regards to control themselves or their outbursts, it might seem cruel or evil sometimes to restrict them more. But in reality, you're doing everybody, that person included, a favor. I don't remember, did we ever talk about that one kid that went viral because I think he killed a teacher for taking his PSP?
Yeah, I saw. I haven't talked to you about it, but I saw the video. Yeah,
that was a thing where I read a little bit about it. If I remember correctly, everybody was passing this off as like over entitled, horrible fucking kid that murders teacher for no reason. But I think that when more info came out about it, I think that kid was on a pretty hardcore IEP. That did he kill her or did he just beat her up? She might not have gotten killed. He might have just beat the shit out of her. But it was like, I think it was pretty obvious when more info came out. This kid was like super special needs, and it seemed like he probably shouldn't have been in that environment. Or if somebody was going to deal with him, they needed to understand what what type of person they were dealing with. That you couldn't just approach them like an ordinary kid and issue commands or take things from them without having an understanding of what exactly they were dealing with. And that just seemed to me like an example of, well, if you give people that need a little bit more special attention or care unlimited freedom to exist in some environment, not only are they going to hurt other people, that person's going to be hurt too, because people are going to have to restrain them, people are going to call the cops, and it just turns into like a whole shit show.
Yeah, and it's like, so the previous company the person was in, I knew people that worked in that company, and our company would make like insult that company, be like, can you believe they restrained this guy? 4 to 1, what quality of life is that? To which I would counter with, we ended up with like the state police showing up at our house probably about once a week, and it was like Hannibal Lecter shit. Like they would handcuff him to a gurney and put him in the back of a police van.
Yeah.
One time we went to an emergency room and he started strangling one of the cops, and they tased him several times. They could not get him to release his grip.
Yeah.
And I'm talking grown men, not like the cops you see sometimes where it's like, you know, dudes that look like me,
out of shape,
like
lazy guys. Yeah,
these are like marine looking dudes that are getting swatted around in this emergency room. And I live in a small enough area that our emergency room at the local hospital, there's not like rooms, there's literally curtains you pull. So that imagine you're in there getting treated with the flu, and all of a sudden you hear this life and death struggle with tasers going off, with this guy just screaming like sounds that don't sound of this earth as he's strangling a state police officer to death. And so after that incident, the head state police officer pulled me aside. He was a nice guy, and he said, I just want to let you know we're never using tasers again. Next time it's shotguns.
Yeah.
He
because a lot of compliance,
serious.
a lot of like painful compliance and stuff, it relies on the other person registering the pain and stopping, you know.
Right.
But depending on the type of character you're dealing with, especially if there are severe mental problems at play, they just won't give a fuck. Yeah.
And then my answer was, well, what's the quality of life for my client if he's getting a shotgun put in his face every week? That's not a good quality of life. I agree. All things, and this is where listen, I know I'm right wing, right? This is an issue that I happen to like take to heart, but there's these two competing ideals that are extreme, where the one ideal is like, screw these people, you know, just lock them up, mentally ill, put them in a facility, lock it up, throw away the key. I don't agree with that, but there's people that are a problem on the other side too, that are so sort of progressive and hippie. They're just like, oh, just like, for example, I had the doctor that we dealt with at that company as a consultant had Asperger's. I'm not making any of this up. This is totally true.
Sure.
He told me one time that the problem wasn't my client. The problem was that his house was haunted with demons. So they made me take an exorcism class, which is batshit crazy.
Okay.
It's like, no, that's not the problem. Then he told me that the farm that we lived by, that there were horses there, and my person, who was basically nonverbal, he could talk in single words repetitively. So he would say like food 60 times in a row. That was the ability of his speaking patterns. He said that he told him telepathically that he wanted to talk to the horses at the farm. So I went and talked to the farmer, and the farmer said, we haven't had horses for 40 years. And then our doctor said, yes, he means the spirits of the horses. That's what he wants to talk to. And so this is the guy I'm dealing with, and this guy's telling me every day, take him to Dairy Queen. Take him to the kids' play place at McDonald's. And I'm telling this doctor, like, he'll kill someone. He's going to kill someone. And the doctor's telling me he made me write a paper about my negative attitudes because my negative attitude was leading to violence. And so you can see the problem at the opposite end of the spectrum where I understand having a big heart for that guy. I love that guy. I did. I worked with him for 2 years and I felt like I was his only friend. But I also knew you couldn't have him in public. I knew that he needed to be restrained. And, ultimately they did things like they drugged him to the point where he was a zombie, and then people at the state said that wasn't right, so they took him off those drugs. Then he became violent. He was the first person readmitted to Polk Center, I think, in 7 years or something like that. I had a falling out with that company, and he ended up passing away in Polk with no people at his funeral. My company, because I no longer work for them, wouldn't give me permission to go to his funeral. So that's how it ended for him. So
if we've largely gotten rid of, or at least I hear this repeated a lot, I don't actually know if it's true, I just hear it repeated so much I assume it's true. If we've largely gotten rid of like the institutionalization places for psychiatric conditions, like the long-term ones, where are these people at now? Do they just bounce between jail and the streets, or like where do these people go?
A lot of them went to companies like mine. So it's one of the fastest growing industries where people, I forget what the requirements are. I think you could have a master's. Technically, I have a master's degree, so I could start my own company probably, but I'm lazy. I don't have the business mindset to do that. Or you have to work so many years administratively in the field. I would.
Or no, I'm asking for people that are your clients. Are these people, does the state pay for everything, or do they have some other income source? Like, have they worked, or do they have family that are paying, or how can they afford your company services?
So it's similar to like someone going into a nursing home in some senses, where if the family can pay, or if they have assets in some senses, just like when you go to the nursing home and you sign over a portion of those, sometimes that happens. But the bulk of the money, the overwhelming majority of the money, comes from the state.
Okay.
It's almost because almost everyone that I'm dealing with has limited connections to family, and if they have connections to family, they're not necessarily wealthy people. I think if you were wealthy and could afford it, you're probably getting some sort of private service.
Sure.
I don't want to talk ill of my specific company. It's the best company I've worked for, but I could say this, in every company I've been in totality, probably 50 to 60% of the people that have my job, I wouldn't trust to watch my goldfish. They're terrible. When you pay people minimum wage, you're going to get a certain clientele of people. And so imagine you have an autistic daughter or sister, and you put them in this facility, and the person that's taking care of them is making $10 an hour. Who do you think you're going to get? Well, you're going to get people that probably couldn't qualify for jobs that were better.
Yeah,
so
I have the
weird,
Yeah, not to do the super progressive cuck side, although it seems like you're partially there because I'm a big capitalist, but it does feel really weird driving to school and, dropping my son off at a place where everybody's getting paid, $42,000 an hour to be the most important influences in the early 4, 5, 6 years of his life. Like, it's insane to me, the level of compensation for people that are involved in some of the most important functions in society sometimes. Yeah. Did I say 42,000 an hour? Sorry, 40,000 a year. My bad. But whatever.
Yeah,
or whatever.
think of hospice care or elderly care. Like, imagine how many people that their intimate last moments are with a stranger that's getting paid $14 an hour.
Yeah.
Because the family lives 3 states over. And it's not even that the family's mean. It's just, what are you going to do if you're 40 and you have kids and you have a career? You gonna stop your life to sit there every day with your ailing father? It's difficult. I find it so strange how we do that. But that's the way it is. So then you have to ask yourself this question. For me, what I do is ideal with people with mental illness. So taking this to homelessness. Now, there's different types of mental illness. Some people, if people are at a certain level where they have some sort of cognitive understanding and they choose to not get help, what can you really do? You can't force you can, but at that point, they don't have to accept the treatment, and then they're going to end up in a harder facility, jail, or a psychiatric facility.
Or homeless, yeah.
Right. So you could be like, oh, yeah, I think, I'm super progressive, so I think what Rob's talking about is good. Let's give every mentally ill person their own home and 3 to 5 staff to work round the clock 24/7. The amount of money, even if you're paying people like me dirt money, it's insane. You have to pay for the house. You have to pay for the upkeeping. You have to the insurance and stuff.
Yeah. So
all of the medical visits.
Something on this track. So this is what I'm kind of curious. I don't know if I asked this directly, or I was kind of getting towards this. For 2 questions. One is all the people that you see are privately housed, right? They're not in large facilities, right? And then the second question would be, do you think that they should bring back, because there's a thing I hear talked about a lot, should they bring back some of those larger group home institutionalization things for people that just can't work or live on their own without full-time or close to full-time care?
Yeah, they should to some degree. Now, I think that there should be far more oversight of it, and they should be staffed better. And I think that places like Polk were getting better. When my client got put into Polk, I believe they had one staff for every 5 patients at that point, which was incredibly better than what you heard about in the 80s, where it might be dozens of patients per staff. And so that more hands-on approach means even if things get more out of control, you have more options than if you have a room full of 20 people. What are you going to do if one person's out of control? There are certain, I still think that there is a space in between as much freedom as possible with someone with a mental disability living in their own home with care versus prison. I think that those sort of facilities do fall in between those two, and there's space for it. It will always be controversial. I mean, I understand that. If it was your kid, would you ever want them put in a facility like that? No, of course not. But it's difficult thing. It's people that fall through the cracks of society, and you have to ask yourself, even as someone who's sort of libertarian minded like me, at what point do we say you can't be in society because you have a mental issue that is so significant that you are a significant harm to those around you? And this comes through with homelessness as well. I have a heart for homeless people, absolutely. But I live in a place where there's hardly any homeless people. I live in rural America. But when I see videos, which I understand I'm getting a selective bias of the videos I'm seeing, but when I see videos of someone walking their kid to school in somewhere like San Francisco, and you see homeless addicts sitting outside their bus stop, for me, although I have a heart for those homeless people, at some point you have to say, this is not acceptable. We can't have this. And it's not enough to just be a hippie and go, well, just give them more money, give them clean needles, give them their own apartment. Something needs to happen at some point if they're unable or unwilling to put themselves in a situation where they're not a danger to, in that instance, children. And I know it comes off sounding like a monster when you say the way to deal with this problem is you have to enforce the law. You should have options for people. You absolutely should. You should have homeless facilities for them. You should have mental facilities and mental care, and that's going to cost money, and that sucks. But at the end of the day, you can't just be like, well, we'll just keep throwing money at the problem and leave them on the streets. You can't do it.
I think some of the frustration is that I feel like homeless people can be broken out into very distinct groups where they're not all the same type of homeless people. And then conservatives will talk about the relatively healthy, 26-year-old guy that just likes to do drugs and is lazy and wants to be homeless. And people on the left will only talk about, the PTSD war vet who has, severe mental health issues but doesn't know how to ask for help. When it seems like there's a lot of different types of homeless people, or there's 3 or 4 distinct groups of homeless people that all need different types of help. I'm curious for this one, because it sounds reasonable to say this, but in practice, you kind of brought the issue up earlier. How do you take a person, let me back up a second. Sometimes people say something and it bothers me. People will say, some people want to be homeless. And I think that that's true on a surface level, in the same way that some people want to keep drinking or some people want to do heroin. And I was like, well, once you're addicted, yeah, they do, right? And people make those choices. But I feel like if you're mentally well and you've got options in life, very few people would choose to be homeless, right? Usually something has gone very wrong to get the person to this point. How do you compel somebody though? Let's say you've got a person who's a little bit mentally disabled, but he's not low functioning. He can speak or whatever, but he can't hold down a job. He can't take care of himself, and he's homeless. And he's like, fuck it. I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna be homeless. Fuck it. I can beg for money and do whatever and be crazy on the streets. How do you take that person's autonomy away and say, sorry, bro, you actually have no freedom. You have to go live in an institution?
It's incredibly difficult. And at the end of the day, let's say I fall in hard times. Let's say, something, God forbid, would happen to close family members of mine, and I just give up because I don't think life's worth living, and I become an alcoholic, and I'm on the street, and I get into heavy drugs. I would probably say there is no damn way I'm voluntarily going into some facility like this. It's not going to happen. What do you do with me then? At some point, you have to be like, okay, well then we're going to forcibly put you somewhere. And that's probably, if you refuse to go to a facility for help, then it's going to be jail. It's going to be some kind, I'll say it's sort of tangentially related to this. One of the things they go through in the training, and I do believe this, is you'll hear a lot in my line of work about incidents or acting up or behaviors. And one of the things they teach you is all behaviors are just attempts at communication. So let's say you're nonverbal and you feel like, I'm your caretaker, but I'm ignoring you. I'm on my phone all day. All of a sudden you might act up by throwing the salt shaker against the wall. Then I write that report up. Oh, Destiny was acting up today. He smashed property and blah blah blah. But really, that was an attempt at a communication. Like, you had to get someone's attention.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that everything that everyone I take care of is we should forgive everything. They're benevolent. I believe the exact opposite. I believe we should treat people as close to normal as possible. Obviously, if you're disabled, there's some arrangements that need to be made. But if you could be a prick person that doesn't have an autism, well, then you could be a prick person that has autism. You could do things just to be a prick. But in general, what I've seen in my line of work is the more you could work with someone and leave them, sort of put them in a position where they could have the chance to do something and have the chance to have some control over their life, but suffer the natural consequences. So if you're diabetic and I take care of you and you're like, I'm going to eat that cake, I can't say no. All I could do is say, that's a really bad idea. I think more often than not, what you see is people make changes for the positive. And even people I've worked with I've never worked with someone with a significant drug addiction, but I've worked with people with alcohol and cigarette addictions. And it's gotten much better over time as you let them have more control over their life. And they didn't feel like they were in a terrible facility like the ones I talked to. And they realized that they were safe. It's difficult. But the truth is, there's never going to be a perfect answer. There's always going to be people that fall through the crack, particularly that we call homeless or people that are problematic homeless. It will always happen. There will be a person that you could give the moon to. You could put them in the best facility in the world, make it the most comfortable, give them everything they want. And then 2 days after that, they're going to be right back in the streets doing the same thing. What do you do with that person? Do you just say, oh, well, I guess our streets are going to be filled with people like this? Or do you say, okay, we have to take their autonomy away now? And, I'm sorry, I do come down, even though I have a big heart, I come down on that side of things where for the greater good of society, we have to say, like, no, you can't be engaged in dangerous behaviors in public like that negatively affect the residents' quality of life or the people's quality of life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree. It has to be paired with it sounds mean, but I think, I wouldn't say being homeless should be illegal, but I think sleeping on the streets or any of that should be illegal. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. But only if there's like a place for you to go, obviously, right? Like, you can't just be throwing these people in jail over and over
again. That's exactly
right.
Yeah. And that's the problem. One of the things, so as a right winger, and I've told my office this, they don't listen to me. I ran for Congress here in this state, and I'm like, they have a bunch of people who are company employees whose entire job it is to basically lobby politicians. But in Pennsylvania, the only people they lobby is the Democrats. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, the Republicans don't really care about stuff like this. And I'm like, but that's because you have to talk to them in language they understand. So here's the case I make. Well, let's say that you don't take care of these people and you send them to prison. Are you aware that you're actually going to spend more money for them in prison? And think of the crimes and things like that, and like how you don't like seeing homeless people, or you don't like seeing mentally ill people in public. Well, by having facilities like this and funding it, and I agree, I think that the government spends way too much money, and I'm hesitant to want to fund things as well. But by funding this, I think you're getting more net benefit from that funding than you would be elsewhere in funding in other areas. So I try to talk to Republicans like that and say, what are their concerns? Well, they're concerned about crime, and they're concerned about sort of the public space looking clean and being good. Well, I think facilities it's not going to solve it, but I think it significantly helps. And, it also, what you're doing is a lot of people that were written off because of their disability or their illness that wouldn't be productive of society. We have special job training programs, which are remarkable. You wouldn't believe some of the jobs that we have one person in our company that became a full-time fireman. Now, he doesn't do all the most difficult stuff, but he works in the fire department and helps keep the place clean. And it's actually an amazing story. This is someone 10 years ago that you would say that dude's going to be in prison his whole life, or he's going to be in a mental facility. Now he's working as a fireman. So, I mean, there are options. I think there are positive stories that come out of it. And but on the other hand, I understand you can't be like, oh, so what are we going to do, Rob? Where every single person that has any mental illness, here's your own free house. Here's 5 staff to take care of you. Of course, that's unfeasible. So it'll never be perfect, but I think right now, it's a better answer we have than either just the medical facilities or sending people to prison or just leaving them on the streets.
Yeah. Have you ever been to the West Coast?
No, the furthest I've been to Texas, Dallas. That's the furthest I've ever been.
Okay,
West.
Man, I've been up and down the East Coast quite a bit. West Coast homelessness hits different. The LA and Seattle, that shit is wild.
I think it probably has to do with the fact that first and foremost that it's comfortable there. Like as far as the
Yeah, I think the
climate,
weather helps a ton. Yeah.
like you don't want to be homeless in Chicago in the winter. That'd be terrible, you know. So if you can make your way to LA where it's beautiful all the time, and then obviously you have more progressive people that, you know,
Some of like
okay,
the
we'll say,
regulations and laws that they write up in some of these cities, where it's like you can't have like a homeless tent shelter built. They draw restrictions like as long as you're 1 foot away from the edge of the sidewalk, it's okay. I'm like, this is wild.
when I always thought it was
My
wild,
God.
like the like I'm in Appalachia. I see poor communities. But here's the thing, where I'm at, where I see, and like I've seen communities where meth has ravaged them. Like I forget who it was. Like I think it's Bill Burr has a joke. Like, do you ever drive through one of these towns and you're like, "Fuck this shit"? Like you can just tell. I've lived in those towns, right? It's a different kind of poverty, though. It is. And one of the things, other than like, there's not people piled on top of each other like poverty in a city. One of the things that I think is different is when you're in a poor area, it's a poor area. When I see like pictures of LA and San Francisco, you'll see these beautiful houses. And then the camera could pan like 2 blocks and there's homeless encampments. And it's like mind blowing to me that we live in a society where you basically have palaces that throughout history, these would have been considered some of the greatest homes that you could ever imagine living in. And not 2 blocks away, there's encampments of like homeless people with mental illness, drug, open air drug markets and things like that. It blows my mind. I don't know what that's like. I've never experienced seeing these, beautiful upscale businesses and homes right next to incredible poverty. For me, if it's poverty, it's poverty. And if it's a good neighborhood, it's a good neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay. I was just kind of curious on your homeless issues take. It seems like a problem that you have to, it seems like the most important thing at first is getting people to recognize that there are different types of homeless people. And then you've got to get people to combat it in ways that actually fixes the problem. But it's a pretty multi-dimensional problem to fix because of all the different groups of people involved. It's just frustrating listening to people talk about it, I guess.
I totally agree. I wanted to ask you a question, if you don't mind, or bring up a topic. I mentioned this on Twitter.
Go for it.
For purely selfish reasons, I don't understand the following. Let's say I'm a right-winger that hates you. Now, I don't think I hate you, but I'm certainly a right-winger that disagrees with you. But let's say it's someone that actually hates you. Why in God's name, anyone that streams would be upset or say you don't have a place on Piers Morgan's show or on Lex Friedman when you're debating Finkelstein or whatever? For purely selfish reasons, wouldn't it be better if a streamer like you is breaking into the mainstream for any streamer, even if they hate you? Then if
it's
you
all
were
because it's just
gatekeeped out
all
of it?
it's all just like partisan shit, right? If you like the person, then it's good. If you don't like the person, then it's bad. I think it's really as simple as that. If you try to analyze it in a more complicated way, it's going to be really challenging. But the simple way is just like if you like the person, it's good. If you don't like them, it's bad.
Yeah, I thought it was so dumb because I made a comment publicly. It was like, I don't understand why people are bagging on Destiny. And I had a bunch of people like, oh, you simp for Destiny now. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I've talked to Destiny. My chance of getting on a bigger show increases exponentially if he's getting on a bigger show. So for purely selfish reasons, no, it's more than that. I think it's, especially for people on the left, like the Finkelstein camp or what, I guess I don't know much about this guy, but like people that are super progressive lefty. When I went to university in 2002, I went for journalism, and the big talk of all my lefty professors was the idea of gatekeeping. And they would say things like, 9 corporations control all of the 95% of the media outlets in the country. And there's something to that. If we only allow certain voices to speak, well, you better get in a member of that group in order to have a voice. So it's amazing to see so many lefties that seemingly would believe that. Also like, well, I don't want a streamer that's a left-winger who favors Israel to have a platform like Destiny. He's just a joke. He's just going to make memes. And then Finkelstein owned him. And then when you're like, well, I didn't watch the debate, so I'm interested. I'm like, oh, what did Norm say that crushed it? Oh, he called him an asshole, or he said he's an idiot, or he intentionally mispronounced his name. Geez, that sounds like the exact same thing they're complaining about about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so it blows my mind how people can't I understand people want to be partisan, but for God's sakes, can't you be selfish for the right reasons and say like, yeah, this is a good thing. I'm glad that people are getting a chance.
Yeah, no, it's all just partisan bullshit. Yeah, I think it's as simple as that. It's unfortunate, but it's as simple as that. Same thing when it comes to like freedom of speech and stuff. I think that freedom of speech becomes really important when you feel like you don't have it. But when you feel like you're in control, now there's like a whole bunch of reasons why it's dangerous. So like conservatives in the 90s and 2000s were really scared about like LGBT stuff or gay people or weird shit like on TV, and they didn't want their kids playing violent video games and blah, blah, blah. And people on the left were like the biggest freedom of speech proponents in the world because they want everybody to have a voice and diversity, and like all this needs to happen so that everybody can be heard. But now when the left is like kind of more in control of the media, well, now the conservatives are like, well, actually, we changed our mind. We think that freedom of speech is the most important thing in the world. And the left is like, oh, actually, you know what? Paradox of tolerance, boom, you're destroyed. And then it just feels really dumb.
So I will say, though, at one time years ago, you had a video that I saw that mentioned my name where you said the way to end conspiracy theories were to end alternative media. Now, I think you were a little tongue-in-cheek. But if you reconsidered your stance of like we should trust the professionals and the people that are trained or academics in this class, now that you debate someone who's considered an academic who's higher than you, like Finkelstein, where it didn't seem that case from the clips I saw. Have you reconsidered that we
well,
should
wait,
just
how
let
long
the
was
experts...
this? How long ago was this video?
Like 2 years ago.
Are you sure?
But it was in reference to, you even said yourself should not have a platform. You were talking about conspiracy theories, and you said one of the ways we end these conspiracy theories is to go back to just having a mainstream media and taking out alternative media because so many conspiracy theories spread there. And yes,
I feel like I'd have to see the video, but I feel like if I said that 2 years ago, it must have been tongue in cheek. There's no way that I could have seriously, because like if you go back like 5 to 6 years ago, or no, 6 to 7 years ago, I think I was more on kind of like some of the deplatforming stuff because I understood the arguments like, yeah, maybe deplatforming is okay and blah, blah, blah. But 2 years ago, that must have been tongue in cheek. That'd be my guess.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Well, I hope you have a fantastic stream. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Hopefully next time we could argue about something.
Wait. Can I do two quick things, two random things?
Sure.
Can I give you critical career advice? I'm just curious.
Sure. Yeah.
Two quick things. One, have you ever considered for directing people towards your stuff, do you have like a name for anything you do? Or do you think Rob Noerr is like hard to spell and direct people towards? Do you think that would help?
Well, so people someone told me one time that I should have a name for my show, and so I came up with the Normal America Show as a play on my last. And then now people tell me don't do that, because when half of my stuff, like my X feed, is Rob Noerr, and it's not even spelled the same way as normal, that I'm confusing people. So if someone types in my name on YouTube, it's not going to show up. Normal America Show will show up. But I've thought about, I'm so fucking bad at marketing. I have no clue. Like the only thing I know how to do is come on, hit stream, and then just talk for hours. That's all I do. I understand, like, I'm fucking up in so many ways. If I had an editor that could clip things into like 3-minute burst, because unlike you, like, I'm a relative unknown. Who the hell's gonna watch some guy they've never heard of come on and do a 6-hour live stream? Not many people.
Sure.
And so if I cut that down into 5-minute chunks, if I had better marketing, like a clever name, maybe that would help. So, I don't know. Maybe it's something I could say. Do you have any suggestions?
No, I truly don't know. One of the biggest things that kept me from branding off Destiny is because I think my name is bad for branding, Stephen Bunnell, because it's difficult to spell and pronounce, and it's just like I don't want people to fucking mistype my shit looking for me or whatever.
Mr. Borelli.
Yeah, Mr. Borelli, yeah.
That's what do you think my background? I heard you right before I came on talking about background. Shit. My wife put it together for me, so.
I don't know. I don't even know if I've looked at your background. Oh, a second thing. Have I ever given you this observation before? I don't know if I have. A secret technique, okay, or secret trick or whatever. Yep. You have a penchant for being a ruthless debater, and obviously my community and a whole bunch of people will get asked mad about our debate. I get asked mad about our debates. Do you feel that you are really easy to cut off?
Yeah, sometimes with you, yes.
Okay.
So so here's the thing. I'd like to reciprocate the energy that I'm getting, but I also have these other things. Some of it I think is simple. I'm not intimidated by you as a debater. I'm not intimidated by you as having a bigger show. But there is part of me when you invite me on, when you say, hey, Rob, can you come on and explain your stance on the Burisma thing? To me, it's your show. And if you want to cut me off because you invited me to your show, it's your show. So when you say, can you come on and talk to me about January 6th? Sure. If you cut me off every 2 minutes, that's different than if I'm in a moderated debate with you.
Okay.
At that point, I feel like, okay, this is both of our show for all equivalents. Here, well, it's the moderator show, but you see what I'm saying.
Sure.
Now, Hutch.
I was gonna say the only reason I bring this up is because in our debates, I have a very strong impression of that. I think in some of our debates, I think I even stop myself. I'm like, well, hold on, let me let you finish, because I think I can cut you off a lot and usually I can get away with it. And at some point I realized, like, okay, hold on, this is too much. I don't know if I haven't watched your Tim Pool show. I don't know if other people do that, but you can definitely fight for more space when you're talking sometimes. Because I notice it.
Yeah.
I can always just cut you off and then start going, and then you won't get to finish your point, and then I can go down some other road. I don't try to do it intentionally, but it's something I notice.
Yeah, and I think that I've noticed that in the past couple times, but I think if you go back and watch when we were on panels, it's completely different. Like,
Okay.
I'll be trying to talk over you, and I'll cut you off and shit like that. But panels are different. You have to fight for space on there no matter what.
Yeah.
So you gotta you gotta be the squeakiest wheel. But yeah, like yesterday I debated Hutch, and I start off. It was supposed to be an interview, I thought, but it became a debate. That's fine. I start off, and it's cordial, but Hutch is doing it more and more. He's interrupted. Like, he'll talk for 2 minutes, then I'll talk for 10 seconds, and he'll start to interrupt. And finally, I told him, I said, Hutch, here's how it's gonna go. I was like, I'm gonna progressively get more and more assertive as we move on, because I can't let you go on this 2-minute spree, and then as soon as I start answering, you're like, but wait, what about this? I was like, so I just want to let you know that's how it's going to go. And then unfortunately, I think what happens is I have no middle ground, right? So I take it from 0 to 100. So by the end of that debate, I'm like, Hutch, shut the fuck up. Like, just saying things like that. And then when I look back on it afterwards, I'm like, that's fine. That's who I really am. Like, I'm not putting on airs or anything. But is that the most persuasive way to get my opinion across? Probably not. So it's funny because I will have people, the impression that you would have that I'm easy to walk over. There are other people that say, like, Rob's a hothead and you can't get a word in edgewise with him when he's talking and this, that, and the other. So for me, I try to, other than what I already told you about being invited on someone's show, I try to reciprocate the energy. I thought one of the best debates for non-interrupt that I ever did was when me and you debated Biden's record on Politically Provoked. Like, Brittany, the moderator, she might as well have not been there. Like, we literally, you would talk 2 minutes, I would talk 2 minutes. You would talk 2 minutes, and then you would ask a question, I would answer briefly, and then leave you finish talking. It didn't require a moderator, and we weren't really interrupting each other. That's my preferable idea. The other thing is my style of debate. I like to do interaction, like back and forth. So I do talk in big chunks, but I love when I'm like, well, let me ask you this question real quick. And then you give a quick answer, and then I go off that answer. And a lot of times it doesn't work like that. So like with Hutch, when I'm talking to him, I'm like, well, let me ask you this. He'll talk for 2 minutes, and I go, let me ask you a quick question. And then he'll answer it with a 4-minute answer.
I notice I can't do that when I'm in big debates, and it drives me crazy because sometimes I want, like, can you clarify real quick? What do you think about ABC? Well, ABC and the history of, and then it's just like, fuck me, I shouldn't have asked him a question. He's just going to talk for 4 more minutes. And I can't do that in big. I stopped doing that.
I've tried to tell myself over and over and over again, when someone asks me a question, to always start off with
ramble?
yes or no if it's possible.
Okay.
I definitely ramble. I do. But I try to start off with yes or no, because it's so incredibly difficult if you say, like, what do you think the cop should have been called? And then someone talks for 3 minutes without saying yes or no. So you're trying to figure out, well, on one hand, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, but what is your answer going to be? I find that incredibly frustrating. So I'll definitely be long-winded. But I try, if you would ask me, like, Rob, do you think this? I'll be like, yes. And here's why, right? That, I don't have a problem with that. And I know I could be long-winded. I get that. But to me, that's different so many times. I'll tell you one who's bad for it. It's Pisco. I remember the first time I debated Pisco, I said, Pisco, do you think before the FBI gets a FISA warrant that they should try to have to verify some of the information before they get it? And I put a timer up. He talked for 7 minutes without saying yes or no.
No shot.
I was like,
7 minutes?
Yes, 7 minutes. I'll see. I may have had to remove. I did basically delete my whole YouTube channel for community strikes over COVID at one point, but I'll see if I can find it. I'll DM it to you. He even laughed about it afterwards. I'm like, dude, you couldn't just say yes or no?
Jesus.
And he's like, oh, okay. Yeah. And I know I'm long-winded. It's funny. It's like one of the things I find funny is when I'll read comments of, like, when I debate you, people be like, Rob talks fast and he gish gallops. And I'm like,
yeah, nice.
Right. That's what they say about Destiny. It's kind of funny. So I'm not, it's pot calling kettle me criticizing Pisco for being long-winded. I get that. I'm just as bad. But I thought that particular instance, that's pretty funny.
Okay. Well, I think that's basically all I had. Yeah, I was just curious.
All right. Yeah, we'll talk. I'd love to talk to you someday about vaccine stuff that you were talking to Jordan Peterson about, but we could set that up some other day if you want.
Sure thing. All right. I'll talk to you later. Have fun.
Take it easy.
Bye.